Hi everyone, I'm Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape. Welcome to my Thursday technique and tip night. Tonight we're going to be talking about reverse embossing. This is a technique I learned years ago, and it appears with a new tool that we've brought out in our January to June mini catalog. It's a technique that's making a bit of a comeback in some of the card making. So I wanted to share with you a few cards that I made and then show you how simple this technique is and how much fun it is, especially with our new blending brushes. So these are just a couple of cards that I made. With this particular card, I am using the stamp set in the annual catalog called Good Morning Magnolia. That's this particular set that comes with this gorgeous big flower in there. There is a coordinating die that will cut this out. And I've got this on Highland Heather. And I actually used a little bit of Blushing Bride ink, Highland Heather ink, and then Pear Pizzazz for the green in this one. And this is clear embossing powder on white cardstock. I've got the Dazzling Diamonds embossing folder to add just a little bit more detail and texture to the card. And then my greeting is coming from the Mini Messages stamp set and dies that is in, again, that January to June mini catalog. And basically what I did was stamp the entire sheet and punched them out, and I just keep them on my desk. And after I've made a card, I can kind of figure out what it looks like for me and add whatever greeting seems to be appropriate. Another example of the reverse embossing technique is this simple card. I used the Stitch Labels framelit and some of the copper embossing powder, which looks very nice with the cinnamon cider cardstock for the in colors that we have right now. And then I just used a little bit of Misty Moonlight with one of the blending brushes to fill in the background, put it on to some vellum and attached it to the cardstock. Very simple card, just saying hello, but again, look how nice that copper looks. I can brush right over this, wipe it off with a tissue, and boom, we're ready to go. And then I've got this beautiful card. Again, white paper, using just two different colors with the embossing brushes. Very simple, but added a little pop with how I angled the images onto the card front here. And again, using the Mini Messages to get my greeting on here. And this particular greeting, or excuse me, image, these two pieces come from the Tasteful Touches stamp set that's in the annual catalog. And I did the same set of stamps, but this time I stamped it in the basic black embossing powder. Did a little bit with the heat gun to melt that, and then I used Poppy Parade and Granny Apple Green. Basically exact same image, just much bolder colors. And again, using one of the messages from the Oh Happy Day stamp set, or the Mini Messages, excuse me, says Oh Happy Day, using the Mini Messages stamp set. But it shows just how different two different colors can do. Very bright and bold, much more pastel and subdued type of a card, but I really liked how these turned out, even though they're quite different. So basically, there's three ways that you can do your resist embossing, three tools that you can use. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with our stamping sponges. I always cut mine up into quarters, and they get stained. I wash them off. There are some demonstrators that do them in eighths and have color tags, and then they never have to wash them up. I have to keep my sponges locked up in a Ziploc bag and high off my shelves where I store them, because in addition to being great for sponging with, this is one of the best cat toys around, and with them priced at $3 for $4, you can't beat that for cat toy prices either. I've got one that carries them around at night and cries. I just keep them in quarter-size pieces like this. I have them marked with a case that I know they're kitties and I'm not going to get ink all over my house. And like I said, a great toy, but I do have to keep mine locked up. Another tool that we're used to using would be the sponge daubers. And these, again, give us a real nice color. You get a lot more control using these sometimes than you do the big sponges because they just fit on your finger and you can tap, tap, tap however you want to get your color going. Again, I keep these kind of out of my cat's sight because they can be battered around and they're a lot of fun, but the sponge daubers work very well. The newest tool that we have available for doing any type of sponging, and it works really well with the resist embossing technique, are our blending brushes. And these are a new tool that came out in the January to June mini catalog. They come in a bag like this. You get 3 of them. And I happen to have colors on all 3 of mine from the work that we are doing today. They look really messy. They clean up with just water extremely well. And it's really just a set of fine brushes. I'm going to try to bring it up so that you can maybe see it. Really, really fine bristles. It almost feels like a makeup brush. Very compact, very tight, very soft. And it just gives a really good smooth texture when you're using them. And again, just soap and water, or not even soap and water, just water will clean them and they'll become basically white. You might have some very minor staining, especially with the red colors. So these are our new blending brushes, and they come, again, 3 to a pack. I can't recommend them enough. I was a little skeptical because who needs yet another sponging tool? I love these. Absolutely love them. I get a lot of control. My fingers don't get messy. Very versatile. Just, I love them. Love them, love them, love them. Okay, so what I want to do is just walk you through the, oh, before I do that, I did want to show you one thing just to help you see the difference. This is all in Poppy Parade. I put this on with a sponge, and so you can see kind of where you've swirled it. I put this on with a dauber. I tend to be a heavy inker, and so this became a smoother surface, but again, you can kind of see the swirling motion that I use. And then this last one is an example using the blending brush, and it stays very consistent, very smooth. Even as I work my way out to the edges, you're not getting any sense of a circular motion particularly. It just gets lighter and fades out. So that's another reason that I like the blending brushes, is I think you get a much smoother look to your finished product. So that's just a quick comparison of them. What I'd like to do now is just show you real quick how to make a couple of different, how to use the blending brushes in a couple different ways with some embossing. So I'm going to start with a rectangle from the Stitch Rectangles die, and I'm going to use 2 stamps from the Thoughtful Touches stamp set and my Versamark ink. And so to start with, I'm just going to stamp this leaf image into my Versamark ink, but I'm going to be very careful that I only stamp this upper part. I don't really want these extra things they'll show up when you emboss. So I'm going to be very careful to just get this upper part of the leaf and forget the lower stems. And so to do that, I can just go stamp my ink, and I'll be careful how far down I go. And if it goes too far, then I'm just going to take my chamois and wipe some of that off. But that has covered it, and I'm okay with where it's at down there. So I'm going to take my rectangle piece of paper, and I'm just going to put this up in the corner. So we'll stamp it down. Now the nice thing about Versamark, and why I like using this the best when I'm inking or trying to emboss, is that it stays moist, kind of sticky almost, for an extended period of time, which gives me time to stamp more than one image and still get embossing powder on and have it stick. And now I'm going to stamp my floral image, or ink up my floral image. This one's got a lot of really fine detail in it too. And I'm going to just kind of look to where my other image is and stamp this one sort of right underneath it and next to it. And I don't know if you can see the Versamark at all. It's kind of a shiny sort of an image, but it will show up real quick here in a minute when I go to add my embossing powder. So I've got a tray that I'm using to store my embossing powder. You can use any kind of plastic container, whatever. I just happen to have this one on hand, and I'm using just the clear embossing powder from Stampin' Up. I do have enough here in the tray that I don't need to pour any over. I tend to try to scoop up underneath and let it fall to the side, you know, the opposite side. And then I do a quick tap, tap. And I have also found that once I get it off, I can just lean over a trash can and kind of flick it with the back of my finger. And that knocks off a lot of the extras that can be out there. If I get any stray embossing powder, you can just take a little paintbrush and kind of brush it out of the way, and you don't have to worry about it any further. Now I'm going to take my heat gun, and I apologize, it's going to get noisy here, just for a moment or two so that I can melt. And actually, while that's heating up, a little quick trick is just to take a clothespin and hold the corner so that you don't burn your fingers. And once this starts to melt, you're going to see it get really shiny. I love watching the embossing powder change from the powder to the clear outline that results when you do this. I think it's just kind of magical the way that happens. It always fascinates me. And I like that moment when it just melts away. Hopefully you can see that on camera. And if you haven't, then that's another reason to try this embossing technique. Okay, that takes care of that. And now I'm ready to start doing some coloring. This can get a little messy, so you do want to make sure that you've got some paper underneath what you're working with for your project. I like to use the little grid paper that we have to go with our Stamparatus. It just fits real nicely in terms of being able to work on stuff without having the big pieces of paper. So for this particular card, I am going to use my Balmy Blue. Again, basically I'm going to be recreating this card just to show you how it works. So I'm going to use my Balmy Blue and my Pear Pizzazz ink. And I'll start with the Balmy Blue on the lower half. And to use these brushes, you just kind of rub it over your ink pad. You're going to see the color, get picked up. I'm going to wipe my fingertip off because otherwise I'll grab my card and then end up with that on there. And some people like to just lightly go on their paper to avoid getting the big blurb. I don't necessarily do that. I just go in and real lightly start touching down on my paper. And I'm primarily doing the blue on the lower half of my image here. And I am going all the way across because I want color pretty much on all my paper. You could go, you could stop and kind of get a little shadow effect going. So you can put on as much or as little as you want to put on. And it's as simple as that. So not a lot of pressure applied. I've got my space filled in and easy peasy. Then we're going to go and use the Pear Pizzazz. And again, I'm going to just rub it on my ink pad. And this time I want to make sure that my focus is on the leaves that I put at the top. So I'm going to start by going over them. And it's okay if I go a little bit on the flower here. I can come back and fix that if it gets in the green part. If it's just, or excuse me, on the blue part. If it's just on where I have embossing powder, it isn't going to matter because I'm going to be wiping that off with a tissue. So I can fix it either way. Okay, and I am going to just, it looks like I got a little green. So I'm going to come back lightly with my blue here and just touch up where I went and got my green. And there we go, we're done. The final step then is you're going to have some ink that sits on top of where you've used your embossing powder. And so all you need to do is grab a tissue. Which is apparently harder for me than I thought it would be. And just rub it over where you've brushed on the color. And that way you're taking off any of that extra ink. It also means that you're not going to get any on your fingers when you touch those areas. And so that's just how simple it is to do that reverse technique, and it really pops out. Like I said, you can do it. I did this with copper embossing powder. I did it with the basic black embossing powder. And this is just on Whisper White with clear embossing powder. You can really do it with any of the colors of embossing powder and then just fill it in. But it gives a lot of wow to your card without having to do a whole lot of effort. And then you would just assemble your card, put greetings on, however you want to do that. Another thing that you can emboss on, and I've already done this, this is a piece of vellum. And again, it's using the large magnolia flower from the Good Morning Magnolia set. And I've put clear embossing powder on top of vellum. And this is a little bit less, it's not going to show up quite as much right now on the vellum because it'll blend in, but it's going to work the exact same way. And so what I want to do with this one is I'm actually going to do a little bit of a pinkish tone to my magnolia. So I'm going to just wipe off to make sure I have most of that Poppy Parade off of here. This is just kind of coloring it right now. And move over to my Melon Mambo. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Because it's not a color I use very often. I'm actually going to use Magenta Madness. And it's harder to open that way because I haven't used it that often. So we're going to come over here. And I'm just going to take my blending brush, and again, you don't have to wash it between every use. I've just taken off a little bit of the excess color. I'd be more hesitant if I were going into a lighter color to be doing this. But I'm just going to run it over my pad and brush it lightly onto my vellum. And you can see that the vellum colors real nicely. And I want to make sure I'm getting it on the flower. And so right now I have it just on my flower here. And then I'll take some of the Just Jade to do my green color. Because why not? We're going to stick with the colors that are in the current In Color collection here. And again, because I just used it in that green, you can see very little comes off, even though that coloring is showing there. And I'm just going to run it over here. I am going to wipe off a little bit, just because this is slightly darker color. And then I'm just going to come and color in my leaves. And again, if I go right up to the edge, that's okay. I can wipe it off. Now here I think it actually went on the back side of the vellum paper because it curled up just a little bit. And that's okay. Yeah, I did get it on there. So then I'm going to take my tissue again and just rub it over. You want to give it a few minutes to dry so that you're not rubbing all of the color off, unless you put it on the back side, in which case you might want to rub it a little harder. And so now I've got this very pretty pastel colored piece. Make sure you don't have any of the colors on your fingers. A very pretty pastel looking floral image here. And I'm just going to put it on white so that you can really see how much color there is on that. So it's a great way to do some of this reverse embossing on, or resist embossing rather, on vellum paper as well. Works in a variety of different ways. Another option is to, if you want it to look a little bit different, you can also emboss on the, or color on the back side. With vellum paper, you're still going to have the raised edges on the front side from the embossing. But this will give it a very different look than what it does when you just brush the color onto the front of the card. And then here you just want to wait a few minutes to let it dry off. You don't really need to wipe it off because it's not going to be sticking to the area where you embossed. And so that can add a little more intensity to the color if you want to do something like that as well. So again, 3 different ways that you can do the reverse resist emboss. However, I think the blending brushes really work the best to give you a really smooth finish in the card that you're working on. I'd like to thank you for taking time to watch my video tonight. I will be posting a tip or technique every Thursday on my YouTube channel. Feel free to follow me on my blog at www.carolscreativeescape.com or on my Facebook page at Carol's Creative Escape Gathering Place. And then my YouTube channel is Carol's Creative Escape with Carol Garrison. And if you like what you're seeing, please be sure to subscribe with the subscribe button down below. And I will see you next Thursday with another tip. Thank you.